Hi, this is Paul McGuire, and I want to talk to you about an important issue. And that issue is the reality of the coming cashless society. And really, that should be rephrased because it's not a coming cashless society. The cashless society is already here and it's being developed rapidly. In other words, all the technology that's necessary for a cashless society is for the most part in place. Banking systems, phone apps, and so on and so forth. Increasingly large numbers of people in the United States of America and other nations, especially Sweden. Sweden is the number one fastest growing country in terms of implementing a cashless society. Only 2% of the financial transactions in Sweden are done in actual cash. The rest are done electronically. So Sweden, by 2020, it'll be 0.5% of the transactions being done in cash, and the rest will be completely electronic. What does that mean? Well, we're going to get into it in this message because I think it has important news for you. Now, according to a number of recent news reports, such as The Guardian published from England, they have an article entitled, "Welcome to Sweden, the most cash-free society on the planet." And then, as you get into the article, it talks about the fact that quote, "In the most cashless society on the planet, sellers of Sweden's answer to the big issue have been equipped with portable card readers to accept virtual payments." And then the article goes on to talk about the fact that the Swedes, the Danish, have downloaded a whole array of new phone apps that allow them to make just about any transaction electronically. In other words, if they're going to buy a hot dog or some food from a vendor on the street, here in America, most likely people would buy a hot dog cash. But in Sweden, they do it electronically. So all the vendors are being paid electronically, and they have a cashless society. Now they're boasting about it, and this is not meant to be offensive to those of you that are from Sweden. But the reality is Sweden, like so many other European nations, are really built in the template of a socialist model. I mean, America is a quasi-socialist state moving more into socialism. But Europe, most of the nations in the European Union are socialist states, and they think like socialists. So they're very compliant, and they don't really question. And I don't personally think that's a good thing. And I will prove to you in this message why there's a huge danger with the cashless society. And my proof will be from a number of sources, but first and foremost, secular authors and commentators who believe that it gives governments the control of novels like 1984, George Orwell's 1984. It gives them Orwellian control or Brave New World control. These are from secular authors, and it should be to any thinking person, any rational person, any person who examines the facts. It should be something of concern. So when you have a population, and again, this is not to be disparaging of people from European nations, but they have. When I was in France, right after the Charlie Hebdo attack, and when I've been in other nations of Europe, I've noticed that they have a very compliant, kind of like sheep, like attitude. And that is due to the fact that they've been indoctrinated in a socialist mindset for many years, and it's ingrained in the culture. Now, um, this article, of course, in The Guardian is praising the wonders of the the cashless society. Um, but it's actually, you could call this article a promotion for the cashless society, about how wonderful it is. But is it wonderful? Um, in the article, it talks about the Swedish banks. Um, they're united in promoting this. But then it says the drive to a cashless society is supported by UN Capital Development Fund's Better Than Cash Alliance. Now, I would assume that means UN Capital Development Fund. That means United Nations Capital Development Funds Better Than Cash Alliance. So, right there, if you're a thinking person, and the operative word is thinking, the United Nations is dedicated in its own writing to the creation of a one world socialist government. So this obviously must fit in with the United Nations master plan of implementing a one world socialist government. So a cashless society must be important to that goal. But listen on further. UN Capital Development Funds Better Than Cash Alliance, which I will spell out UN, United Nations Capital Development Funds Better Than Cash Alliance, which aims to accelerate the shift to electronic payments, funded by, well, guess who? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, MasterCard, Visa, and others. So why would Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation be promoting a cashless society? Well, I will simply suggest to you read what other things they support. There's a commonality, there's a commonness in their agenda. I'll just leave it at that. So, according to this article in The Guardian, these organizations are behind it, and people feel safe. Now, I want to dig in here, though, to the, and you can go to the article if you choose. It's at theguardian.com. As you probe through the article, little things emerge which are very, very important. There is, however, concern about how well Sweden's 1.8 million pensioners, out of a total population of 10 million, will adapt. Quote, a lot of elderly people feel excluded when you need to use cash cards or your mobile phone to take a bus or use public toilets. And so it talks about the fact that it's not a big thing with retirees. But I want to suggest something else. If you have, which is what happened in Greece and Cyprus, you had a economic crisis, and the banks declared bank holidays, and the authorities of the European Union arrogantly said to the people of Greece and Cyprus, you need to get a haircut, which was a rude way of saying you need to, we're going to make you take a pay cut. Okay, so when they said to them, you need to get a haircut, they were saying, we're going to make you get a haircut or take a pay cut. So what they did, the banks, through the ATMs and through attempts at withdrawals, limited by a large percentage the amount of money people were allowed to take out from their own pensions, from their own retirement funds, from their own bank accounts. Because remember, the G20 created legislation at around that time, which said that the deposits that these hard-working middle class and working class people in Greece and Cyprus and throughout Europe, the money that they put into their banks, this is done through the power of the banks. The money you put in the banks, you no longer own. Well, who owns your money if you don't own it? The minute you put it in the bank owns it. And this, by the way, you don't ever see it talked about openly in a serious discussion because you have just 6 corporations controlling all of the major media in the United States. And the 6 corporations that control the major media in the United States don't want you to know that. This is why I talk all about this. You have to know. You really, if you don't understand the implications of this, you are a big target for problems. And in my new book, A Prophecy of the Future of America 2016-2017, among other things, I zero in on the U.S. economic system, the global economic system, and factors like this. Because if you don't understand it, and the average person I talk to is absolutely clueless, by the way. That includes Christians. You're going to be victimized by it, as the people in Cyprus and Greece were. It was their money. They worked for decades to have a pension or a retirement or a savings or whatever. And when they went to get it, the banks told them, no, you can't have it. You can only have, let's say, I'm picking out an arbitrary figure, 30% of a dollar. They don't deal in dollars, so that means 30 cents on every dollar you're allowed to take out, or 20 cents on every dollar. Why? It's our money. Aha! See, they weren't paying attention. The banks had secretly rewritten the rules and said, when you put your money in the bank, you don't own it any longer, the bank does. And that was decided at the G20 meetings. But that same, see, they don't come out and say it's a law. So they're very sneaky, but essentially it is a law. And they've done the same thing in the United States. So under the new regulations, all the money you put in the bank, you don't own. So if there's an economic crisis and you want to get your money out of the bank, no, you're not legally entitled to it because you're just a depositor. You would have to stand in line after all the big financial institutions to see what was left over. And if there was a government intervention on your behalf, you would get, let's just say arbitrarily 25 cents, 50 cents on the dollar. But even if it's 50 cents on the dollar, you lost 50% of your money. And then the other thing is everybody's under the delusion that they're protected by the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. But in a time of economic crisis, the FDIC doesn't have the funds available to cover your losses. So you're not protected. So, but here, reading the article, that the people of Sweden are clueless, as the Europeans are just, this sounds like I'm picking on Europeans, but Americans are just bad. It's hitting here first, but they're clueless. But then again, the average American's clueless too. So now, so Sweden, I won't get into everything else Sweden did, but they're big, whatever the globalist cause is, you better believe Sweden jumps on it. So whether they're buying hot dogs or whatever, I'm not advocating sex services, okay? But hiring somebody for sex, prostitution, or whatever, again, I'm not advocating it, is done now electronically. Okay, so that is something that you should pay attention to. It's spreading throughout Europe, and the reason it's spreading is it's being promoted by the European media. It's being promoted by the Gates Foundation and all the large banks. Why? Is there a danger? Is there a danger to you? Well, the Bible talks about this. By the way, if there wasn't so much a bias against the Bible, the book of Revelation has discussed a one world economic system and a cashless society for over 2,000 years. When the Apostle John had a vision on the Isle of Patmos, and God gave him a vision of the book of Revelation, in which God showed him supernaturally what would happen in the last days. And one of the key things that God showed the Apostle John is depicted in Revelation 13, where you have two beasts, the Antichrist, who's the head of a one world government, and the people worship him as God, and the false prophet who's in charge of the creation of a one world religious system and a one world economic system. And then in Revelation 13, you are given a choice. If you're here, you're given a choice. If you want to participate in the economic system, if you want to buy or sell or eat or whatever, or have a house, if you want to buy or sell and participate in the economic system, there's a requirement. And I have an article, if you want to read about it for free, at paulmcguire.us. There's a requirement. The requirement is you must openly reject your Christian faith in Jesus Christ being God. You must renounce your belief that Jesus Christ is God. You have to deny that. Number two is you then have to pledge and confess and state, as a matter of fact, that you will, from now on, worship the Antichrist as God. If you renounce Christ as Lord and worship the Antichrist as God, then you will get the nanochip implant, the biochip implant, the microchip implant, whatever technology they decide on. And remember, that's coupled with a computer-brain interface. So that chip transmits, let's say, with an RFID signal. It can interface through a computer brain interface and a computer-brain satellite interface. It can communicate to the banking system. But the condition is you must renounce Christ. Now, we're going to get into that in a moment, but I want to get into the secular criticisms first. But you must understand that the Bible very, very clearly says that if you renounce, if you refuse to renounce Jesus Christ as Lord, and you refuse to worship the Antichrist during the tribulation period, under which the Antichrist is ruling and the false prophet is ruling, then the penalty, and the Bible is very specific, the penalty at this time period will be that you will be beheaded. So it's very, very specific. It says you will have your head chopped off if you refuse to renounce Jesus Christ as Lord and worship the Antichrist as God. Now, for years, this latest prophecy book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016-2017, I believe is my 28th book on Bible prophecy, and I've been studying Bible prophecy for probably about 40 years. And I always was puzzled and disturbed and thought it very odd that the way that people would be put to death if they refused the mark of the beast would be through a beheading. But look what's happened in the last number of years. It seems the number one choice for radical Islamic groups like ISIS, when they're attacking people, is to behead them, chop off their heads. So that archaic, we thought that beheading was something that goes back to ancient history or goes back to the time of the French guillotines and the French Revolution. We thought we long left that concept because it's so barbaric. But no, it's going to. So I always thought it was weird, but then militant Islam came to power, and they have made it in vogue or in style to chop people's heads off. An oddity, but it's interesting how the Bible is always accurate, even if temporarily the Bible appears to be weird and not understandable, and people say, oh, that could never happen. But then you give it just a few years later, and bam, the Bible is always relevant again. So that's the penalty if you refuse to accept the mark of the beast. Now, the mark of the beast may also involve genetic alteration with your DNA and your ability to receive it. So that's the biggest, as somebody such as myself and maybe many of you listening, I believe I believe in the basis of intelligence as well as faith. But if there was no intelligence and historical fact behind it, then I wouldn't have the faith. So it's a synergistic perception modality, if you will. So I believe that the Bible is the literal, inspired, and inerrant Word of God, and that we are to believe it literally and at its plain meaning, unless it is indicated otherwise in the text. And now there's plenty of places in the Bible where Jesus says, "I'm talking to you in a parable," or a prophet is making a parable, or is saying something symbolic. All over the place in the Bible, there's passages where it gives you a head up that it's symbolic or it's not to be taken literally. So then when you read that, it's a parable or whatever, then you recognize that it's symbolic. But when the Bible does not identify particular passages or verses as being symbols or being myths or whatever, then they need to be taken literally and at its plain meaning. Now, of course, the meaning has to be accurate in terms of the Greek and the Hebrew and the Latin and so on and so forth. So the book of Revelation, when it talks about the mark of the beast, I believe it's clearly referring to a microchip, nanochip, biochip implant. Now, I've been criticized for people for making that statement, and I've made that statement, for example, in my book, The Day the Dollar Died, my book, Are You Ready for the Microchip, my book, Are You Ready, and A Prophecy of the Future of America, and now A Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016-2017. But the point is that people have said, well, the actual translation of the word, when talking about a microchip implant, means, like a tattoo. Well, interestingly enough, when the person asked me that question, an article in a secular scientific magazine came out and said that tattoos are a great medium of which you can place a microchip or other kind of chip implant. That the chip, which is microscopic, can be inserted within the layers of paint of the tattoo that you put on a person. So, a tattoo is not a contradiction to a microchip implant. Now, let's go back to the secular criticisms. And I want to spend a little time here because just on the basis of logic, a knowledge of history, common sense, economics, a study of totalitarian regimes, and things like that, there's numerous other reasons why we should be concerned about a coming cashless society and a microchip implant. So there are logical, historical, rational reasons apart from theological or biblical or spiritual reasons. So there was a very interesting article in The Atlantic, and by a very, I consider her a brilliant writer, because she dealt with the cashless society and Big Brother from a secular standpoint. And it was quite interesting. And I'm going to read you some of what she said and discuss it now. This is from the Atlantic magazine, which is also on the internet. And the title of this article is How a Cashless Society Could Embolden Big Brother. Subtitle, When Money Becomes Information, It Can Inform on You. And this is written by Sarah Jeong, Jeong, published April 8th, 2015. So she begins by talking about Cass Sunstein in 2014, who was a former regulatory czar for the Obama administration. And he wrote an op-ed piece where Cass Sunstein advocated for a cashless society on the basis that it would reduce street crime. And he specifically talked about the implementation of what's called the EBT, or the Electronic Benefit Transfer System, that they give to people on welfare, and how this would help crime drop. Now, before we go on, you need to know something about Cass Sunstein. Cass Sunstein when you do research into his background. He's a very educated man, but he very much believes in Plato's system that society should be ruled by an elite. This goes back, and I go into this heavily in my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016-2017. And the idea, of course, Plato believed that Atlantis was a real super civilization. And in the legend of Atlantis, which Plato believed existed, he wrote a book called Plato's Republic that all the members of the elite read, including Sunstein. Plato said that Atlantis was ruled by 10 philosopher kings, or some said god kings, or an elite, a scientific elite who knew better and therefore would tell the masses what to do and what to think for their own good. So Sunstein believes this. He also, although he would deny that he's a Marxist, he holds to many Marxist totalitarian beliefs. The most disturbing is that you, or we, speaking of himself and other elites, we're going to control everything for your good, which means you have no more freedoms. So his belief was that, okay, we're going to control, we're going to get rid of cash, we're going to use these EBT system and push a cashless society, but it didn't work out right. And a lot of things happened with drug dealers and other things that kind of blew up in his face. And then in 2014, shortly after Sunstein issued this op-ed, the Department of Justice came under fire, according to this article in the Atlantic Monthly. The Department of Justice came under fire for Operation Choke Point, which is a system that they have where what they designated as being high-risk merchants, they can electronically shut down all your means of paying what they consider high-risk merchants. They can shut down through Operation Choke Point your ability to use credit cards or other electronic means to buy things from them or to withdraw cash, et cetera, and the idea would be that you can control crime. The problem with Operation Choke Point is that when you see the companies that they designated as high-risk merchants, and I'll give you an example that the author points out in her article. And again, I am not advocating being a porn performer. That's not the issue, or what they call an adult entertainer. I'm not promoting that at all. I'm simply saying when you target any group of society, it has a shockwave effect. And what happened to this group could happen to any group. So, for example, Operation Choke Point shut down the personal bank accounts of hundreds of adult entertainers. I assume to stop violation of law in regards to people selling sex for money, prostitution, et cetera, all which may have legitimate goals. So, but the problem is that Operation Choke Point shut down all their accounts, everything. So this one particular porn actress got very seriously ill, and she was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, and none of her big credit cards, and she couldn't pay for it anyway, and like she was getting ready to die, and people independently raised money for her. But the point is, it wasn't just people in the pornography industry. It was people in all kinds of things that were having their lives just destroyed by an out-of-control Big Brother system to push people into a cashless society. And that was the warning of the author. And especially poor people were especially the victims because they were the most powerless. They had and the elderly because they had no means of defending themselves. Now, the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, um, worked with other groups, and they gave a list of bullet points of merchant categories that have been associated with high risk activity. And it's important to understand, I'm going to not read all of them, but I'm going to read some of them, is that um, these merchant categories, these products or services, that it's going to be obvious what these companies sell when I name the merchant categories that they're in. And Big Brother, if you will, can shut down anybody's credit cards or whatever they're using electronically to buy any item in these companies, in these type of companies, shut down cash withdrawal, shut down everything. So it's not that there aren't categories here that obviously can be abused and obviously could lead to criminal behavior. No, we're not saying that. But the potential for Big Brother abuse is huge, and with people having no recourse to do anything. Okay, so here's just some of the merchant categories that are designated as high risk and subject to being shut down, people's ability to shut down their ability to buy or whatever or sell electronically. But remember that when you're shutting down somebody's ability to buy, sell, or withdraw electronically, it's not pinpoint accuracy. It knocks out the whole system a person has. So you can't even buy groceries and milk or anything, potentially. Okay, so these are the high-risk merchant categories or activities. Ammunition sales, coin dealers, credit card repair services, dating services, debt consolidation scams, drug paraphernalia, escort services, firearm sales, get-rich products, government grants, home-based charities, lifetime guarantees, lifetime memberships, lottery sales, mailing lists, personal info, money transfer networks, online gambling, payday loans, pharmaceutical sales, Ponzi schemes. I don't even know why they put there, because nobody would. Somebody has to make a decision that it's a Ponzi scheme, and I would assume that you would have to go through a court of law to make that determination. Pornography, pyramid-type sales, racist materials, surveillance equipment, travel clubs. Okay, so just glancing at this list, and they're all subject to Big Brother Orwellian shutdown, it's obvious that from glancing at the list that there are a number of items that, assuming you had that the data was used responsibly, that some of these areas could be potentially dangerous to society and could be potentially criminal, and it would be potentially necessary to use something like Operation Choke Point or another electronic means to shut them down. But others of them are so ambiguous that you can see that the potential for abuse is huge, where people's credit cards would be shut down for legitimate things. Now, you see obviously that ammunition sales and firearm sales, well, first of all, you have a Second Amendment. So apparently it appears to be in conflict with the Second Amendment. However, if you have somebody who was, heavy-duty psychiatric problems or crimes, shooting people, obviously there would potentially be a need to shut down that individual's or group's ability to buy ammunition or firearms. Now, but then you get into the very iffy coin dealers. Well, they don't want people selling cash for coins. Why? Why is that illegal? It would be illegal if there was criminal intent involved, but it's not illegal. See, the problem is, for a lot of these things, it's not necessarily illegal. Dating services, well, again, it's what happens with this dating service. Many dating services are fronts for prostitution. But then there's this thing, I saw it on television the other day on Fox News Network, I think it was being advertised like crazy. Something like, it's just lunch or something, which obviously was a dating service, an upscale dating service with the direct message that there's nothing sexy going on here. There's no hanky-panky. We're, we're allowing you to have lunch with somebody to see if you want to continue to see them in a dating relationship. Now, if you're taking it's just lunch and putting them into a category of a dating service and shutting somebody down electronically, you might have business executives, business women, all kinds of people who are not criminals, have no illegal intent here in terms of prostitution order, and their cards are being shut down because somebody arbitrarily makes a decision who's not qualified. Okay, so then get-rich products. I don't know what that means. Who makes that? Who makes that determination? Whether it's legitimate or a get-rich product. Government grants. That's very odd to me. If you're applying for a college loan or whatever, or whatever it is, you could have all your credit cards attacked. Who's making the decision? Some bureaucrat or somebody who's qualified? Lifetime memberships, online gambling. Again, I'm not for gambling. I don't gamble, but it would have to do with whether there was criminal activity going on. Payday loans. I've never used payday loans, but I understand that a lot of people live, and they on payday, I guess they can go down and get a loan, which means they could potentially be exploited. But I guess if you're desperate and you're starving and you can't get milk and food for the children, why is all your electronic ability shut down? Why do you do that? Okay, then pharmaceutical sales. Well, it depends on what kind of pharmaceuticals. If you're buying, I don't know what the law is on some of this stuff, but if you're buying antibiotics or something legally, let's assume it's legally. Why can you be electronic? Pornography. Okay, I'm not an advocate of pornography. I'm not for the promotion of pornography, but the reality is, this has nothing to do with my own moral beliefs, but the reality is that a certain amount of sexual material is legal in the United States of America. I may not approve of it, but it's legal. And then some of it's criminal. So again, these racist materials. Now that's, of course, any one of us would be against racist materials, but that definition can be broadened by who's applying it. All right, and abused. So you're shutting down somebody's electronic ability to buy surveillance equipment. Was somebody buying a night vision thing to look at the wildlife, or somebody trying to sneak across their backyard? I don't know. Travel clubs. Why is that? So in other words, the potential for abuse is huge. And yes, there can be some legitimate means, but the point is, with the press of a button, you can completely shut down. You can starve somebody to death. Here's the point: no court of law, no responsible group to go for, no court of appeals. I don't know how long it would take a bureaucracy to clear somebody who was. If they accidentally shut down your ability to buy and sell electronically. You could be wiped out. You'd be starving. You could be kicked out of your house. You could not make your mortgage payment or your rent. You couldn't get groceries. You can't get medicine. The potential for abuse is huge. Okay, so that's the danger. Now, the author of this article wrote this: a cashless society promises a world of limitation, control, and surveillance, which the poorest Americans already have in abundance. And I want to read that again. And this is the danger of a cashless society. The Swedes, in all due respect, many of the people in these European socialist nations, they're nice people, but they need a good cup of coffee because they're you know, this is not meant to be unkind, but very naive, as many Americans are very naive. This particular author, secular author, not a Christian, writes, a cashless society promises a world of limitation, control, and surveillance, which the poorest Americans already have in abundance. So she's warning that a cashless society gives Big Brother control, the ability Big Brother to spy on you, and all kinds of other things that are something that we should be concerned about. So again, there should be serious concerns, because when you give any government, which can be Big Brother, and most governments naturally drift towards Big Brother when they're given the power to do so unchecked, and they're not accountable. That's the nature of human history. It goes way beyond America. It goes back to the history of mankind in the first governments. It's the basis for all totalitarian societies. It's when you give any group unlimited power over the people, they always abuse it. That is a law of history, whether you like it or not. You may not like what I just said. And say, oh, we have this accountability and this and this. Well, you're a fool, because what you're saying is a denial of historical fact. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. In fact, the Word of God, the Bible says that. The fall of man, Adam and Eve, activated the law of sin and death. Their fallen human nature took over, and the attributes of a fallen human nature are passed on generation to generation, because every man is born a sinner apart from their Savior, Jesus Christ. And man's sinful nature, almost like gravitational pull, leans towards lust, power, the abuse of power, and all kinds of other problems. And that's the same when a collection of men and women rule. It's man's fallen nature. Okay, so the author makes the point that the people who are going to suffer the quickest and the fastest are those that are poor, because they can't hire lawyers or anything else to defend themselves. So these are concerns that should be put in place. So obviously now, here's the real thing. Obviously, there is a global push for a cashless society all across Europe, through the Bill and Melinda Gates foundations, through the major credit card companies, through the major banks. Okay, so let's deal with that. And I deal with it in a big way in my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016-2017. And my other books, Prophecy of the Future of America, which is a completely different book, The Babylon Code, The Day the Dollar Died, and numerous other books. Because I really felt led to research these topics. So in the Prophecy of the Future of America 2016-2017, I reviewed a material you may be familiar with, which is the basic basis for our U.S. monetary system, which is built on an international banking cartel which controls our money, and our government and we the people have no say-so in it. We're not allowed to know what the Federal Reserve is doing. We're not allowed to know who are the families that control the Federal Reserve. We are not allowed to know anything about the interior workings of the Federal Reserve. And that includes all the senators and presidents and vice presidents of both political parties. And the door is totally shut by law, because you see the world's most powerful international bankers in 1913, 1914 passed the Federal Reserve Act. By law, they slammed an iron door shut, and they are not subject to scrutiny, interference, or accountability to our government or we the people. And they print money from nothing, which is outrageous. They can print billions and billions of dollars from nothing. You don't have to have gold to back it up or anything tangible. You just print. Wouldn't you like to have a business where you can print money from nothing? Wouldn't you like to have that same privilege where you could go to your copying machine and print currency and then use it as much as you want? Tens of millions of dollars. All you needed to buy is cartridge, ink, and make sure your copier was up and running. That's exactly what the Federal Reserve does. It's a completely risk-free business. You can't lose. Now, by the way, wouldn't that fit in the definition of a Ponzi scheme? Now, so that's the basis of our monetary system. They control recessions, they control depressions, they control interest rates, and the entire system operates on debt. And the game plan of the Federal Reserve is to get individuals in debt and nations in debt. So, for example, the U.S. is 19 going on 20-something trillion dollars in debt. It is obligated to pay the debts that they borrowed from the Federal Reserve back to the Federal Reserve with interest, big debts. So that means, since our government, just basic economics, our government has no money. Our government never had money. Our government has no money. So the money that the government gets to pay back the debt from the Federal Reserve comes from taxation of we the people. It's just that simple. Government doesn't produce money. Government doesn't generate money. Government doesn't store money. So it comes from taxing we the people. So through raising the taxes on we the people, they pay back the enormous amount of debts plus interest to the Federal Reserve. That's called debt loan slavery. It's a system. It's a calculated system. It's been in place since the time of Babylon. In fact, it was part of Mystery Babylon. And I write about this in the book. Unless you understand this, unless you understand this, you're clueless about everything going on in our world. So, this began way before America was born. It began at the dawn of history. I call it the Pharaoh God-King system. It existed in the time of ancient Egypt. Pharaoh worked God's people as slaves. And then they were indoctrinated to believe that the Pharaoh was a god. Therefore, they were serving God. And the Pharaoh benefited from the slave labor of the children of Israel. As all, the Incan ruins or Mayan ruins are testimony of these similar societies. The idea of what happened in Egypt and ancient Babylon and Mystery Babylon, what happened in Europe in what is called the divine right of kings, where the people are told that the kings and queens and their families come from the DNA of gods. And by the way, this lends some credence to the Nephilim and the fallen angels mating with human women going back before the flood and then after the flood. So, because they're God kings, they have a divine right to rule, and therefore the people of Europe accepted their slavery to work as serfs on the plantation of the kings and queens, because after all, the kings and queens were gods. So you have to understand, I hope the light bulb goes on right now, you have to understand that in order for this system to work, which is, by the way, the essence of Mystery Babylon, in order for this system to work, there has to be the implementation of a religious system, an economic system, and a governmental system. And there has to be the implementation of a one world government, one world religion, and one world economic system. Because the triune nature of this system, economic, religious, and political governmental, is how it works, going back to Babylon, or going back to ancient Egypt. So you control people's minds through a religious system. And part of the control system is you teach the people that the rulers, the kings or the pharaohs or whatever, or the queens, that they're gods, and therefore it is your destiny to serve them. Okay, so people's minds are locked into place. And then that you have to accept your slavery and whatever monetary system you're given based on this three-part thing: one world religion, one world economic system, one world government. That's why God judged ancient Babylon. Ancient Babylon was judged by God, and it was the world's first one world economic system, one world religious system, and one world government. And God developed by Nimrod. And the whole mystery Babylon incorporated that system. Now, God judged it because it was Luciferian in nature. The purpose of the Tower of Babel was to worship Lucifer, and it was an occult worship tower. And then God judged it because God knew that even though the people were unified, in their hearts they wanted to go up to the stars and be like gods. See, it was satanic in nature. God knew that. And so the story of the Tower of Babel it's a heads up for what's happening right now in our society today. Because right now, even as we speak, we're seeing the emergence of a one world economic system, one world religion, and one world one world government. And the same template is being used. You have to create a global religious system, which is what the New Age is. I'm not criticizing all of Catholicism, but a lot of what I hear in the current Pope and some of the other high-level leaders of the Vatican sounds very much like Mystery Babylon, in the sense that they're trying to unite all the nations of the world into a one-world religion, which has nothing to do with the Bible. And then you have this coming cashless society, mark of the beast technology, the United Nations and all these globalist institutions. They're pushing for this. They're pushing for this. And this is how it interfaces with Bible prophecy. So, the Illuminati, which is real. On the back of the US dollar, you see a pyramid, which is an Illuminati symbol. In the words at the base of the pyramid, Novus Order Seclorum, New Order of the Ages, or New World Order. The all-seeing eye of Horus, or the all-seeing eye of Lucifer. It's a satanic global system. Right there on the back of the dollar bill. And the Illuminati are still around. And they worship Lucifer. And the spiritual gurus of the United Nations, like Madame Blavatsky and Alice Bailey, etc. I go into all this in detail in my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016-2017, is Luciferian. So, you see two things happening in terms of the needs of banks and the needs of governments around the world to control. That's what it's all about, like George Orwell warned about in 1984. You see this, and also you want to tax everything. You want to control. You don't want there to be a hidden economy. You want to control, monitor, and tax every penny. So you erect a massive control grid, which is a cashless society, and then the technological way you're going to implement it is you have to put inside every human being, either through a microchip, nanochip, biochip, or maybe even modification of DNA, some kind of chip implant, which where whatever you buy or sell is tracked, and then there's a computer interface. Let's say the microchip implant is in your forehead, because the Bible says it's either on your forehand or forehead. And the computer brain interface connects to a computer via satellite. You're into like a global economic matrix. And you are required, as the Bible says, to do a number of things in order to get that mark of the beast. So this is where the warning and the danger moves from the pragmatic, moves from the economic, moves from the issue of governmental control, and moves into the issue of spiritual. It moves into the issue of spiritual. Now, isn't it interesting? It's really interesting that the Bible, 2,000 years ago, approximately 2,000 years ago, the Bible talked about some kind of nanochip, biochip, microchip implant. They call it a mark. But when you know what that mark does, where you can't buy or sell, it's obvious, it's technological. 2,000 years ago, the Bible alludes to some kind of global economic technology called the mark of the beast. That's pretty heavy. But the bias against the Bible is so strong against the media and educators and others that they don't even look at the Bible. I mean, even if you didn't believe the Bible in terms of the essential truths of the Bible, like Jesus Christ is Lord or whatever, if the Bible was nothing more than an historical document or a document that was spiritual in nature, well, it sure is pretty accurate when it describes a future society in Revelation 13 with the mark of the beast. So let's just read some of Revelation 13, because this is the critical warning, because we're right on the precipice of this happening. So it says in Revelation 13, verse 1, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of a blasphemy." Okay, so this is speaking of the coming one world charismatic ruler, the Antichrist, who appears to be ruling, I believe, and I explain it in my book, a 10, some people believe it's the 10 nation, that the European Union will reduce itself down to 10 nations. And this is what this is talking about. I believe more likely it refers to this beast, which is the Antichrist, ruling over 10 regional global governments. And each one of these regional global governments are in the form of unions. So we have the European Union, and right now through secret trade treaties, we have the emergence of what will be called the North American Union, which is the coming merger of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. You already have the Asian Union, African Union, and so on. So they divided up the world into 10 regional global governments called unions. That's what this is referring to. Now, then in verse 4, "And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" So they worshipped the dragon, and the dragon is Satan. So they're worshiping Lucifer, who gives power to the beast versus via a global a religious system run by the false prophet. And then it says in verse 5, "And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months." So the Antichrist, I believe, is speaking blasphemies such as he is God. He has set himself up to live in the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem, and he's demanding that the Jews in the entire world worship him for 40 and 2 months, which is 3.5 years, which would be midpoint in the tribulation period, also known as the Great Tribulation. And then there's the warning. It says, and verse 11, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon." This is the false prophet. False prophet is behind the one world religious system and the one world economic system. And then it says in verse 12, "And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him." So there's 2 beasts. The first beast is the Antichrist. Second beast is the false prophet. So the false prophet exercises all the power of the first beast, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound is healed. So earlier on, we read that the Antichrist is wounded seriously, and people think he dies, or he does die, or whatever, and he comes back to life. My supposition is via some kind of counterfeit resurrection. which could imply, especially when you're making references to worshiping the image of the beast versus worshiping the beast, is that a holographic projection? Is it a clone? I mean, that's speculative on my part, but I think it gets into the area of the singularity and transhumanism. That's my personal opinion, but I have a lot more study to back up that idea from. Verse 13, and he doeth great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on earth in the sight of men. So the false prophet is calling, he's doing supernatural signs and wonders like fire coming down from heaven. This is speculative on my part, allude to something like Operation Bluebeam and a artificial UFO or a demonic UFO event, which would play into the ultimate last days deception. Again, speculative on my part, but there's reasons for it, and I get into it in my books. And he deceives them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he had the power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had a wound by a sword and did live. So they're deceived by these high-level, powerful signs and wonders, and which is a warning to us. Signs and wonders can be from God and legitimate, but we never are supposed to worship signs and wonders by themselves. Signs and wonders must line up with the authority of God's word. If signs and wonders are being performed, no matter how spectacular, but they lead people to worship somebody who is obviously in conflict with the word of God, then they're false signs and wonders. And then it says, this is very important, verse 15, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast. Notice it doesn't say the beast, image of the beast. And that goes back to my speculation about a hologram, about virtual reality, about cloning or transhumanism or whatever, or taking DNA and in kind of a very accelerated speed, rebuilding the Antichrist. Again, speculation on my part, but in light of today's technology, I don't think it's that far-fetched. So they worship the image of the beast, and it says that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So, under the Antichrist system, anyone refusing to worship the image of the beast as God is killed. And we said that. And then it says in 16, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or on their foreheads. And that mark is, some people thought it was a tattoo, but we already know tattoos can contain microchip implants. So that is either a microchip implant, a nanochip implant, a biochip implant, or perhaps a DNA chip implant, most likely with a computer-brain interface and a computer-brain satellite interface that plugs you into a global economic matrix where you can buy or sell because you've chosen to worship the Antichrist as God. And then in verse 17, and that no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name, which is 666. So here's the thing. You can't buy or sell anything. You can't participate in the economic matrix. You can't buy anything. You can't sell anything. You can't get into the economic system and live and survive unless you specifically and deliberately renounce Jesus Christ as Lord and you declare that you worship the Antichrist as Lord. At that point, you're allowed to receive the mark of the beast. Now, if you refuse to worship the Antichrist as Lord, then you are beheaded. And Revelation talks about that towards the end of Revelation. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So that's the passage, Revelation 13. There's other passages too, but that's the most classic passage which deals with the mark of the beast. Now, one final thing, and you can get more information at paulmcguire.us, paulmcguire.us, and you can get information on the brand new prophecy book that deals with the monetary system and the things I've been talking about, A Prophecy of the Future of America 2016-2017. But the one thing I want to say is, because I get asked this question all the time, you know, if you're being offered a mark or a chip or whatever, and nobody has told you that you've had to renounce Jesus Christ as Lord and say you're worshiping the Antichrist as God, then that, according to the biblical definition, does not mean you've accepted the mark of the beast. Now, I also say, you know, this needs to be up to your conscience, and you need not to violate your conscience. But the reality is that this world that we live in is so quickly technologically evolving that many, if not most, soldiers have a chip. And I don't believe that for a moment that they've received the mark of the beast, because it doesn't qualify to be the mark of the beast. There are people, many people, in increasing numbers, especially the elderly, who have a med chip in them, and so on and so forth. So you're going to find that chip being distributed more and more. Now, could that chip later on be reactivated as the mark of the beast? Yes, but it would entail your confession that you're renouncing Jesus Christ as Lord and you're worshiping the Antichrist as God. Again, you don't want to make a decision that violates your conscience. But at the same time, you don't, a lot of people, I think, are imposing upon themselves false guilt and an unnecessary fear. And I understand it, believe me. I mean, it's weird. This is like science fiction. You know, especially soldiers, men and women serving in the military service, have not received the mark of the beast because they had to receive, for military purposes, a chip. You know, the reality is they didn't know it, but the reality is back in the Vietnam War, a whole lot of soldiers got what was called the Rambo chip put in them. Vietnam War soldiers. And that Rambo chip, I don't know how it was activated, but it boosted the soldiers' adrenaline. So it was a primitive attempt at making the soldier a super soldier. Now, that Rambo chip was not the mark of the beast. Anyway, I believe that God makes a promise to his people, and that God promises to deliver us from the wrath to come. And I don't want to get into the other theological debates in a moment, but, you know, God doesn't abandon you. He doesn't abandon you. So remember to trust the Lord. Ask God for wisdom. And I believe God wants to make a way of escape or deliverance for his people. Now, the nature of that way of escape or deliverance is subject to theological debate. Some people believe that it means deliverance within the tribulation. Others who believe in the pre-tribulation rapture believe it means being rescued out of the tribulation period before the Antichrist is revealed. I don't want to get into that now because that would take countless hours, and I've taught on it. But one thing that whatever your position is on the timing of the rapture, we should share the common belief that God does promise to deliver his people from the wrath to come. And the nature of that deliverance, that's where the theological argument is. But in any case, God has made a covenant with his people. And if you're seeking the Lord and you're crying out to God, I believe that the hand of the Lord is upon you. Does that mean that certain people aren't going to experience martyrdom and other things? No, because Jesus said we'll have tribulation in this world. Some people will be martyrs. They're martyrs now all over the world. But many people are not called to be martyrs. So trust the Lord, keep seeking his face, and don't fear. And remember this, whatever the implication of the mark of the beast brings about, the implication of accepting the mark of the beast is a million times, no, it's infinitely more horrific and terrible than anything that could potentially happen to somebody who rejected the mark of the beast and boldly declared Jesus as Lord. Because the worst that can happen is that you die and you're absent from the body but present with the Lord. You stand there in front of Jesus in heaven in a nanosecond. But for those men and women who renounced Jesus as Lord and chose to worship the Antichrist, the Bible is very clear. Yes, they get the mark of the beast. But the Bible is also clear that when you read the end of the book of Revelation, that all those that received the mark of the beast, their punishment is they're going to be thrown into the abyss. They will be sentenced to hell along with Lucifer, the false prophet, and the Antichrist forever and ever in a place of eternal torment. And that is horrific. So the price tag for accepting the mark of the beast is eternal torment and judgment. The price tag for rejecting the mark of the beast may well be God's supernatural deliverance. And if it does come to the place of death, it would be very quick. And in a heartbeat, you would be standing in the presence of the Lord in heaven, delivered from all this nonsense. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire. Go to the website, paulmcguire.us.